This is a moment in Jewish history. This week marked the 281st anniversary of the passing of Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar, author of the book Ohr HaChaim, The Light of Life. Like many famous rabbis, he is referred to by his famous work, and there have been many events in memory of the Ohr HaChaim in Israel and around the Jewish world this week. The Ohr HaChaim is a commentary on the Torah and explains principles of faith and the teachings of the sages. Although it was written by a rabbi from Morocco, it became an important text for the new Hasidic movement developing in Poland. But first, some biographical information. Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar was born in Sela, Morocco in 1696, which at the time had a thriving and important Jewish community. Chaim was taught by his grandfather, who had the same name, Chaim ben Attar the Elder, who was head of the great synagogue in Sela. Their family originated from the exiles of the Spanish Inquisition. Chaim wrote of his grandfather, "I studied Torah with my teacher and grandfather, Rav Chaim ben Attar of holy and blessed memory. He was a great rabbi, well known, pious and humble, who in his time I drank living waters from. From my birth I grew up on his knee and took in all his wondrous sayings. He was so pious that I would say that he almost never slept even half the night. He even spent the nights of Tammuz reciting lamentations over the destruction of the house of God, crying profusely like a widow. He finished the night by studying with myself and others who, like myself, were his descendants." Chaim's father, Moshe ben Attar, was also a respected rabbi. Life for Moroccan Jews was mixed in terms of safety and security. For example, the community was often spared during social unrest, but it was due to payments and high taxes. During one such period of political instability, the family fled to nearby Meknes. It was here that young Chaim got married, and his father-in-law supported him as a budding scholar. The family returned to Sela, where he became a well-known rabbinic leader and in charge of financial aid for the community. He became known as a peacemaker who would justly decide on disputes in the community and make sure the poor were treated respectfully. Many miraculous stories are told about him. One took place during an epidemic of livestock when there was very little meat to be had. One portion of kosher meat was available, and a wealthy man offered a large sum to the Ohr HaChaim for it, but he refused, insisting that instead it be divided and distributed to the poor and needy. Times were tough. Both his father and father-in-law passed away. There were famines and political unrest. In addition to working as a rabbi and community organizer, Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar was also a goldsmith. A story is told that one day the Sultan's daughter was to be married, and so he hired the Ohr HaChaim to use his goldsmithing talents for the upcoming wedding. One version of the story tells that the Sultan wanted him to weave gold thread into the wedding dress. He could have never finished all the extensive work in the time allotted. So dedicated to his Torah study was he that he devoted a certain amount of time during the week to his scholarship, something he also urged his students to do. After all, one's livelihood ultimately comes from above, as he taught. The Sultan was furious when the work was not complete. He ordered the Ohr HaChaim to be thrown to the lions, which were kept in the palace for just such occasions. The rabbi sat amongst the lions and recited psalms. He was left untouched. According to one version of the story, the Sultan pulled him from the lion's pit and apologized. The book Ohr HaChaim happens to have a related commentary regarding being killed by wild beasts. In the book of Genesis, Joseph is thrown into the pit by his brothers, but the Ohr HaChaim asks, if they really wanted to get rid of him, why didn't they just kill him? Because they wanted proof that he was deserving to die, and if the snakes and scorpions in the pit didn't kill him, maybe he was innocent after all. The Ohr HaChaim spent most of his life leading the Moroccan Jewish community of his city, but he longed to move to the land of Israel. Not so easy in the early 1700s, and he and his family on the way stopped in Italy, where he resided with the Jewish community there and had several of his important works published. This was during the time when many Jewish people were seeking to relocate to the Jewish homeland. When preparations were made, he set out for Israel with his family as well as 30 students and their families. They initially settled in Tiberias, where the learned sage Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar had recently renewed the once thriving Jewish community of Tiberias and greeted him warmly. The group initially wanted to settle in Jerusalem, but an epidemic prevented them. Finally, Jerusalem was safe, and it was here that he set up Yeshivat Knesset Yisrael in 1742, which still exists to this day. Many famous rabbis studied there, including Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the Chida, who wrote, "I, as a young man, was privileged to be at his yeshiva, and my eyes saw the greatness of his Torah. He uprooted mountains like a resistless torrent. His holiness was that of an angel of the Lord." Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar passed away in 1743, only a year after he moved to Israel, and was buried on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. The study of his books are considered segulot for health and fertility. His grave became a pilgrimage site for many. During World War II, the Nazis invaded Egypt, and the possibility existed that they would invade the land of Israel as well. A large prayer gathering was held at the grave of the Ohr HaChaim. During the Jordanian occupation of the Old City of Jerusalem, which took place between 1948 and 1967, they uprooted many of the tombstones in the Mount of Olives cemetery. Among those that remained untouched was that of the Ohr HaChaim. A story is told that a Jordanian bulldozer plowed through the gravestones, but was flipped over when it got to his. The Ohr HaChaim yeshiva still stands too, even though the Jordanians destroyed many synagogues and yeshivot in the Old City. After Jerusalem was reunited in the Six-Day War of 1967, the site was reopened and used by Hasidic Jews. Today, it is part of a complex that houses the Ari Synagogue and the Old Yishuv Court Museum. The book Ohr HaChaim was of course popular in the Moroccan Jewish community, where the rabbi was from, and in Israel, where he moved to, but it also spread among the new movement taking shape in Poland, Ukraine, and the Jewish shtetls of Eastern Europe. Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic Judaism, was enamored with the book, and it spread among his students. He attempted to travel to the land of Israel to meet the Ohr HaChaim. He was not able to, but his brother-in-law did. Rabbi Avraham Gershon of Kitov initially rejected the Hasidic movement, but he was eventually won over and became a staunch supporter. Rabbi Gershon moved to Israel in 1747, and his letters to his famous brother-in-law shed light on life for Jews in the Ottoman era. A story is told that Rabbi Gershon attempted to pray in the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs in Hebron, something forbidden by the Ottoman authorities at the time. He was sentenced to death when he was caught. When the Ohr HaChaim heard the news, he cried and prayed. Rabbi Gershon was released from the decree and showed up at the Ohr HaChaim's doorstep that Shabbat. This past Shabbat, I bumped into an old friend who happened to have a weekly Shabbat Parsha sheet, and sure enough, there was a reference to the Ohr HaChaim, whose yahrzeit is this week, and told of his teachings and stories over 250 years later. This has been a moment in Jewish history. For questions or comments and past shows, you can visit benbresky.substack.com. Thank you to all the listeners, and Shalom.